Morena whānau, welcome to, I have no idea what episode this is, but let's call it the start of season 2. Some of you people might be thinking at Waka Kotahi, thinking, hey, didn't that guy leave? Yeah, I did, but I promised to come back and keep doing these with my good friend Henry.
Kia ora.
So today we're talking about an introduction to interviewing.
Yes. An introduction to interviewing. So we've talked about planning, and in the planning episode we talked quite a bit about investigations, and a few of our other discussions probably mentioned interviewing, but we're going to focus on interviewing as a topic.
Yeah.
So what do we mean by interviewing? What's an interview?
I think I'll just start by saying interviewing in itself is a massive topic.
Yeah.
And it's as much an art as a science, and there's a whole bunch of legal stuff in there as well that shapes how you have to do things. So I think the important thing around what is an interview is there's no definition of an interview. Some people talk about a formal interview. I always joke, is that where you put a tie on? But really what is an interview? In my head, it's when you're working for the regulator and someone is telling you something about an event that you're investigating or you're about to investigate.
Yeah. It's kind of the everything else category. I mean, you think about the way that we gather information, and maybe that information is evidence, or maybe it's just information, but the way we gather information, there's, searches for records or taking records. In exciting cases, there's a bit of surveillance. Sometimes we can do like a production order over a third party where you can go and ask a third party to produce documents and information for you. And then there's everything else, which is just talking to people.
Well, this is really about collecting evidence from people.
Yeah.
When you're interviewing. If you think about it that way, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So anything that's kind of not taking physical documents and records or not doing surveillance, which as I say is pretty rare and exciting, that's what we mean by interviewing. Talking to people, getting information from people.
Yep. I've made some notes about some key points that I want to talk through, things that are really important. And the first one of those is record keeping. And we've done a whole episode on record keeping. But I think that's absolutely crucial when someone's telling you something, that you're recording it accurately and perhaps as most accurately as you can. There's a whole lot of different guidelines around it. I think best practice is to record things electronically. That way there can be no confusion at all around who said what. Next best practice, I guess, is to write it down. You got any thoughts on that?
No, just I agree with that. And let the person know that you're recording.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Legally, you don't have to, but really good practice. There's nothing worse than someone thinking that you've tricked them into recording them. Yeah. So just be upfront about all of that.
But I thought if we're interviewing a suspect, we do have to let them know we're recording.
We do.
But we don't want to talk about suspects today.
No, we'll do that in the next episode.
Yeah, so we're going to focus on interviewing what we call witnesses. So these are people who we don't think have committed an offence. We don't think they are suspects, but they have information that will help us determine whether there has been offending and potentially to prove that. So that's everyone who appears in court as a witness, but we're going to use witness to mean somebody who's not the suspect.
Yeah, and that is a really good segue into the next point, which is around your planning. Usually you'll have a bit of time to do some planning, and as part of that, you should be working out, is this person, or does this person potentially have any liability? Because in complex cases, people can be a witness and a suspect all at the same time. That's particularly relevant under the health and safety legislation, where a worker's got obligations, but they might also be the witness to the event and the victim at the same time. So you've got to be really careful around when you're dealing with someone, be clear about what they are or not.
Yeah, that's right. And particularly when you might have a corporate defendant. So you might end up prosecuting the company, and this individual, there's nothing to suggest that that individual has done anything wrong, but they are an employee and representative of the company. So it's important, are they speaking as a representative of the company or just for their own personal account? So that can get quite tricky too.
Really clear about things, eh?
Yeah.
And don't make any promises. It's really common sometimes for people to say, hey, look, Henry, I'm happy to tell you everything, but I don't want the boss to know, or I don't want anyone else to find out. And what I say is as an investigator, you shouldn't be making any promises around confidentiality of that. Yeah. Because you are subject to the OIA, the Privacy Act, and the Criminal Disclosure Act. So what I would say is I can't make you any promises around that. I can ensure it's not disclosed unnecessarily, but one day a court might actually order me to disclose it. Yeah. And if the person's not sure, then don't push them. That's not fair to be pushing them. If someone says, I'm not really sure, you've got to think for some people, they want to do the right thing, but if I tell the regulator, I might lose my job. So you've got to respect that and go, well, okay, fair enough. Just don't tell me unless you're really confident doing that.
Yeah. So how do you actually get people to talk to you, Paul? Because if say there's been some sort of accident or incident, we're coming in to investigate. Now, we might be investigating just to find out what happened and learn from it, but there's always a chance that we'll decide to prosecute. You want to talk to somebody, you don't think they're a suspect, you just want to talk to them as a witness. And they might have questions like, is this being recorded? Well, yes, it is. Can this be kept secret from my boss? Well, no promises. So I am always surprised that people talk to us at all. If people kind of sort of take the time to think about their rights in that situation, they could just run away and say no thanks. So how do you actually get people to talk?
There's a whole lot in investigative interviewing around building rapport and getting to trust people. My experience is people trust professionalism. So if you turn up, you look professional, you're respectful, you're patient, you listen to them, you're very clear about what you can and can't do. You're not there just trying to be their mate to get them on side so they'll tell you stuff. You've got to do a little bit of that at a personal level. But I honestly think no one's going to tell a regulator anything if they fundamentally don't trust them. If they don't have that confidence that my information is going to be used properly, that I'm going to be looked after, this person's not going to misrepresent what I've said, you kind of trust that they're a professional. You think about it, if you went to a doctor and you turn up and it's a professional looking outfit and the doctor's very honest with you, you're going to have a trust and confidence. If it's not like that, you're going to be going, I'm not sure. I might just go and get a second opinion on this, So put yourself in that kind of level of professionalism, build that trust through that professionalism and being really clear about what you can and can't do and just being straight up with people. And people have a lot of motivations for talking to regulators as well. Like, people want to do the right thing. They want to see the right thing being done as well. Some people want to unburden their story. It feels good to good to tell someone, and people like to talk as well, fundamentally, if you ask the right questions. So being really clear, I guess, around why you're there, what it is you want to talk about. Sometimes for some people too, it's about being clear about what you don't want to talk about. So they might have done something that might embarrass them or whatever. You can be really clear. We don't need to hear about that. If it's not relevant to the facts, we can leave that out and just focus on this one part. So I think asking the right questions, and often asking the right questions can be quite tricky. And there's a real skill to this. I like the TEDS model. I don't know if you've heard of the TEDS model.
I have, but I've forgotten what it means. It's not a TED talk.
No, definitely not a TED talk. It's tell me, explain to me, describe for me, or show me. So they're nice open-ended questions. And if you use that kind of framework, you get away from these traps of falling into double-barreled questions where you're asking two questions in one.
Yes, I do that quite a bit, actually.
Confusing questions, where you've chucked in some acronyms, you think that they know what you're talking about, and it's a big 25 sentence question, and then with "wouldn't you agree" at the end of it. So, I'll tell me what happened. Describe that for me.
So what is it? Tell me, explain to me. Describe for me, or show me.
And describe can also be draw. Sometimes the person might be getting really stuck in the explanation. You go, oh, hey, would it be easier for you if you just drew this? And they're like, oh, yeah, so here's the street like this. And because some people like to express themselves that way, it's much easier. So I think I always like to tell people too what I want to know about, not what I want to know, but what I want to know about. So, Henry, I'm really keen to learn more about your involvement with this company. Tell me about that. As opposed to going, are you involved with this company? And then 10 questions to clarify your involvement.
The other thing actually I've noticed with good questioning is when the interviewee uses descriptions to get them to elaborate. So, we were going fast, but not that fast. And you say, well, how fast was it? What do you mean by that fast?
What does that mean to you?
It was painful, but not that painful. Well, tell me more about that. Particularly when people are using that subjective language, and it's all relative. What some person thinks is fast or painful or whatever is different. So really dig into that. And actually, if you ever go to I've noticed actually doctors are very good at this. I have a mild allergy. to things, and I say I've got a mild allergy to these things, and they go, "What does mild allergy mean? What do you mean by mild allergy?" Like, I've never been in hospital. Oh, okay, all right.
So I like to think about that as being careful. So you always have to preserve the integrity of your witnesses. And one way to do that is to clarify all the time, just being really clear about what they're talking about. So that way later on, they can't be accused of not knowing what they're talking about or confusing their story or telling a half-truth or a mistruth.
Yeah.
So if they say something that isn't quite clear, always ask for that clarity. When you say you were going fast, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
And just keep going. And the other thing to watch for too is if they tell you something that conflicts something else that they've already said.
Yes.
And then you're sitting there thinking, hang on a second, 5 minutes ago you told me it was Tuesday, now you're telling me it's Wednesday. Actually, just clarify that with them. Go, I just want to check. And they go, oh, no, sorry, I was confused. Or you might be confused and they might go, no, there was actually 2 days involved here, Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay, I made an assumption there about things. So always clarify, check the detail, go through, just be very careful and methodical. Interviewing takes a long time. If you want to do it right, you can't do it quickly.
Yeah. So how do you set up an interview then to make sure that, you're giving yourselves the conditions for success?
Yeah. I think ask the person what's going to help them. Like try and really find out what's going to be the best environment for you to talk to me.
Yeah.
You don't want to arrange to talk to someone, and we've all done this, I've certainly done it, talk to someone at their workplace and you go down and it's a building site, you can't record anything, you can't hear anything. And the person's going, I've only got 15 minutes and my smoker break and I've got to get back to work.
Yeah.
So have that conversation with them early. What's going to put you in the best place to be comfortable to tell me your whole story? It's important to me. I want to hear everything you've got to say. They might say, can we do it in your office? Yeah, sure. And then go, all right, how are you placed for parking? All of those things. You don't want them 45 minutes into an interview that probably take 3 hours and they go, I've got to go and move my car because my meter runs out.
Yeah.
So just have that conversation with them, make sure you've got the space and think about what's going to work for them. Think too about who's the people that they might want to have with them. We seem very, I think this is an old throwback of people have to be by themselves for an interview so they're not tainted by anyone. But when you think about that through some cultures, that's absolutely the opposite of what they need.
Yeah.
Particularly if a younger person or a vulnerable person or someone who's anxious, they might want to have 2 or 3 support people with them in the interview room. And that's cool, just do that, but be very clear that those people are there to provide support to that person, not to answer the questions for them.
Yeah.
You still need to hear from that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking, when I hear that, I'm thinking of examples I've dealt with here at Waka Kotahi where actually what you want is somebody's fresh account of an accident or an incident that's just happened. And so you're at the site and you want to talk to people there. You don't want to book an interview. Yep. But the same principle holds, isn't it? Try and create the conditions for them to be relaxed, feel comfortable to talk, take them aside or whatever it is.
Yep.
And present that professional front that you're talking about.
I think there was a time in interviewing where it was all about a fresh account. And you wanted to get the person as close as you could to the event to make sure that their memory wasn't tainted or they didn't make anything up in the meantime. But I think since then people have worked out that actually if you've been subject to a car crash, for example, an horrendous thing, you might have 3 weeks of trauma where you're not thinking about anything other than the car crash. And actually your statement's not going to be that reliable. So it is on an individual basis.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with doing 2 interviews. You should always leave the door open to come back. So if you talk to someone roadside, for example, and you take some quick notebook notes, and that's just, that might be the first time you talk to them, you might go away and collect a whole bunch of facts and information and evidence around other things and realise, actually, I need to talk to this person, in a different setting where we've got the time and we can really drill down into some of these subjects rather than in a quick fire on the roadside.
Yeah. Very good.
You made me think of something else about use of interpreters.
Oh, yes, interpreters.
This is a really challenging one. Use your own instinct to assess whether or not the person needs an interpreter and always err to the side of caution. I've seen interviews where the person said, no, I don't need an interpreter. My English is fine. And you get 10 minutes into it and you're like, I'm pretty sure you're not really understanding the questions. Yeah. And then they start answering in a way that you think, we're not communicating well together here. Yeah. And I've had interviews where they've said, I don't need an interpreter. And I've said, that's cool, but I'd like to have one there just in case there's some words I use that need interpreting.
Sure.
And you always end up using them. They'll always be it's much easier in their second language, in their first language, to talk about in detail than their second language.
Yeah.
So if in doubt, get an interpreter. I know there's a cost to that, and it can be an inconvenience with transcribing statements and stuff, but it's certainly a lot safer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's always best to take that least regrets approach where you can. Take the abundance of caution approach.
We were talking about the TEDS thing. I'm just checking my notes here. Something else I wanted to talk about is what you have to say as the interviewer isn't important.
Yeah.
And a really good way, in fact, it's not even evidential, a really good way to kind of like assess or have a look back over your statements and kind of assess how well am I doing as an interviewer is take out everything you said and just read their answers.
Right.
And if you can give that to someone who knows nothing about it and they can just read the witness's answers and give you a good description of the event, then you've done quite a good job.
Yeah.
But if you're reading it and all it says is, no, yeah, it could have been like that, maybe, you're thinking this is completely meaningless.
Yeah.
So always remember that. What you have to say isn't important.
And it goes back to asking those open questions.
Open questions.
You're not cross-examining. You're not putting a whole lot of things to them for them to confirm.
Yeah.
It's tell me, explain to
me, describe for me, show me. And frame it up. I'm really keen to learn more about, or I'd like to understand more about this particular point. Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Explain that for me.
And the other point of that approach is it helps you as an investigator keep an open mind and keep 100%. That investigative mindset where, there'll be some things at the start of the interview, I bet, where you think you know what the first few answers are going to be because you think what happened and you just want to get that down in their words as you've just told me.
Yeah.
But actually what comes out is quite different.
Yeah.
And then you need to follow that and keep thinking about that. So I think the advantage of these questions is it both is less threatening and will be more comfortable for them, but it also helps you run a better investigation.
100%.
And be more credible.
And those assumptions are really dangerous, but they run both ways as well. So the person you're interviewing will often assume that you know a lot more than you do.
Right.
And they won't tell you stuff because they assume you already know.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I always say to people up front is I want you to assume that I don't know anything about this at all. That means I'm going to ask you some questions that I already know the answer to, like what is your name?
Yeah.
But that's just important to get that in the recording.
Yeah.
And then usually people will tend to tell you a lot of other stuff. And this happens too when you're dealing with technical subjects. People will assume that you have the technical knowledge, or they'll use acronyms. So always go back and clarify what are the acronyms, being really clear, being really careful, just going through. I understand what you mean when you use that acronym, but can you I just want to check off it right.
So can I ask you, I find when I'm dealing with technical people and they explain stuff to me, what I like to do is explain it back to them in my own words and how I understand it to check that I've got it correct. Is that all right in this situation?
Yeah, it is. Paraphrasing is an interviewing technique that some people use.
Yeah.
I don't use it much because I think it has the risk sometimes there.
Yeah, because as you say, you want it in their words, not yours.
Yeah, the benefit to it is it shows you that you're listening.
Yeah.
The risk with it is that they start to anticipate that all you're going to do is paraphrase what they've said back, so they start paraphrasing because it's just easier for you. They want to help you out as an interviewer.
Yeah.
I'll give Henry the short story. It's just easier when he has to repeat it back to me. So I'm always careful around how you do that.
Right. So maybe something to do at the end of the interview. Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is it's important for you to walk away confident that you have understood that technical matter.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
I think it's important too when you're understanding technical matters, understand the difference between a technical opinion and what the rules say.
Yeah.
So sometimes technical people will just default back to, it has to be this way. And if you drill down, they're telling you that because that's what the rules say it has to be.
Yeah.
But actually you want to know, well, is that safe? Or what are the kind of conditions that make that unsafe, or how safe is it, Excuse me.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, very good. And what if you're interviewing this witness, you're using these techniques, you've made them comfortable, they're telling their story, and then all of a sudden they're so comfortable they start saying things that incriminate themselves.
Drop themselves in it.
And they drop themselves in it. And all of a sudden you're thinking, maybe this person has done some offending.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're probably wanting the short answer to this, but firstly, you need to go, is this offending that's relevant to what we're talking about today?
Yeah.
If it's yes, then it's, do I stop the interview now because I need to get more prepared to ask them questions about this and be upfront, or do I caution them and continue the interview? So you have to make those decisions, sometimes on the spot, because this does happen, and then you sit there and go, oh, I'm actually interviewing the liable person here, and you have to decide. But again, just go back to those things about being fair and being really clear.
Yeah.
So Henry, you've just started to tell me some stuff that makes me think you might have some liability here. Because you've done that, and because I work for the regulator, I'm going to caution you, and then you go into the caution. Or you might say, I'm going to actually stop the interview. Or Henry, I don't want you to answer any more questions around that just yet.
Yeah.
I still want to tidy up some points from when you were telling me things about being a witness.
Yeah. And
so you kind of
finish the witness bit.
Yeah.
But we can talk more about that in the next episode. We're going to talk more about interviewing suspects and what happens when your witness becomes a suspect.
Yep.
Very good.
We haven't covered off what happens if your suspect becomes a witness, but we can do that in the next interview too.
Right.
All right. So
we're going to need a 4x4 square here. I'm getting confused. Okay, so what I heard there was the importance of record keeping.
Yeah.
Everything's on the record. Nothing's off the record. So don't make any promises. And just be upfront with people about the conditions you're operating under and show that professionalism, why you have to record it, why you can't make any promises. And if you present that professional front and ask people what's going to work best for them, then you're giving yourself the best chance to get the information you need.
Building that trust through your professionalism.
And that TEDS model of questioning, open questioning, and your point about if you take all of your words out of the transcript, does it still read well?
Yeah.
And the risk around paraphrasing, sort of advantage and disadvantages of paraphrasing back at the end of the interview.
So just on that point too, I think, I said earlier, it's an art and a science. If you want to develop the real craft of interviewing, you have to do a lot of interviewing. But every time you talk to someone, it's an opportunity to practice those conversational interviewing skills.
Yeah.
You'll do that to a point. I know for me, when my son started going, "Oh, Dad, please," he couldn't get away with anything because I just interviewed him all the time. So every chance you get, every chance you're talking to someone, there's a chance to be practicing those kind of conversational skills that you can use in interviewing, and just keep on practicing it and find your style. For some people, paraphrasing works really well. Other people will find it awkward and weird. It won't work. Just find what works for you. Yeah.
Actually, some advice I've been given is don't feel like you're the one who has to fill the silence.
Oh, 100%.
If the silence goes on long enough, they will fill it.
Yep.
So
I've heard that for extroverted people, 2 seconds. 2 seconds of silence is too much, and they'll start talking again. For introverted people, 45 seconds can be quite comfortable, and then they might start talking again. So it doesn't matter if you've got a 3-minute break in your interview where you don't say anything. They will start talking again. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you, everybody. Ka kite.